My daddy uses Anchor to publish his podcast, and he loves it. Not only can he record, edit, and distribute on this platform, but he can make money at the same time, all for free. If you too would like to get started on your own podcast, go to the website anchor.fm or download the free Anchor app. Don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for listening. Have a great day. Let's go!
Welcome to another episode of the Third Eye Podcast, the podcast that is dedicated to open dialogue regarding the difficult topics that we all face in life. I am your host, Marcus Callahan, and thank you very much for joining me this evening. Welcome to another episode of the Third Eye Podcast. I am your host, Marcus Callahan. I do appreciate all of you being here with me listening. I hope you are at home safe, practicing social distancing so we can flatten this curve and get back to our normal lives. Today we talk about security versus freedom and what is the balance between freedom and security. This may seem like one of the eternal questions pondered by the ancients. You know, you're thinking of freedom and order, which is an entirely different matter. But in fact, this is a recent issue raised by terrorism and the specter of weapons of mass destruction. Until September 12, 2001, Americans gave little thought to the clash of freedom and security because the pressure against freedom came mostly from barriers involving race, gender, and religion. Security was a targeted issue, not that much of a broad issue, except, of course, during the Red Scares after both World Wars. The modern pressures on freedom come less against social mobility and personal expression than they do on the widely accepted freedoms of personal mobility and personal communication. In the contemporary world, unfettered access to public venues like sports stadiums or concerts or things like that, and the ability to communicate without government surveillance via cell phones and computers are now genuinely at risk. The combination of the modern means of communication and the nature of modern terrorism raises the question of whether restrictions on the one might help battle the proliferation of the other. That is the central precept the administration is employing in arguing that its use of cell phone and computer records is a minimal but justifiable intrusion on what, only a few years ago, was regarded as commonplace commerce and communication. Indeed, the head of the National Security Agency said that these techniques have interrupted dozens of terrorist plots. But even among those who are reliably counted as national security absolutists, many on the right and some on the left, there are grave questions about whether the intrusions are worth the cost. The price of freedom has been an enduring American question dating to the 18th century. It was posed for white men of the partition class in the battle for taxation with representation in 1776, for blacks in the Civil War between 1861 and 1865, and for all mankind in the World War of 1939 to 1945, when the Axis powers enslaved and in some cases exterminated millions. But now this large question is being applied to small, unremarkable aspects of modern life that have grown out of the wide distribution of the computer and the cell phone. Suddenly, a theoretical debate is a practical one, as close to the heart as a smartphone in your breast pocket. Seldom has a debate that seemed to be suited to the philosophies been thrust quite so swiftly into the public square. Today, I have a guest with me to help tackle this debate. All right, welcome to the Third Eye Podcast. I have with me a good friend of mine, my cousin-in-law, Mr. Dallon Stone. How are you?
I'm doing good. How you doing, man?
I'm doing really well, man. Thank you very much for participating and being a guest on my podcast. I appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. Anytime.
Awesome. So, today we're talking about security versus freedom and if they can coexist with each other. You, like myself, are a man of security.
Hmm.
So I felt that you would have a nice perspective on the subject.
Yeah, I mean, so on one hand, you've got a lot of people who are paying for our services as guards, and they know nothing of the field. They think that it's an easy thing. They think that they can just, you know, use us to mop floors or do the tedious things, and they usually end up not using us as security guards. You know,
Yeah, I agree with that.
and my company that I'm with now, the owners don't let that fly at all. Like if anybody who is purchasing our services through, you know, whether it be for a cultivation site, a dispensary, anything like that, we've had a lot of people that have tried to tell our guards, like, oh, can you take out the trash for us? Can you mop the front lobby for us? And our bosses just got to a point and says, no, we're not maids for you. We don't come in here and do custodial, because when they're doing that, guess what? They're not doing their job.
Right.
So from our standpoint, it's really hard to gauge sometimes, because there are things that they want that take away from our job as security and making it as secure and safe as we possibly can, just to help somebody else with with helping them feel more free during their, either during their shift or at their site, things like that. It's a weird balance, you know.
Right.
And
Yeah, man. I like at my site, like we're pretty much receptionists. Like
mhm.
it's not in our job description for me to be calling people for you and things like that. So yeah, I get what you're saying. Do you subscribe to the notion that more security equals less freedom?
um you know I'm sure there's a lot of people that put it in such a black and white scenario of more is less or less is more, whether it be freedom or being more or restricted. But it's not like that. What it really comes down to is, if we're talking about an overall grand scheme of things of, the government and military and things like that, more could be, you could get more freedom with more, or you could get your freedom restricted with more. It all depends on how it's run. It depends on the rules behind it. There's so many factors that go into it, and in my opinion, if done right, it shouldn't restrict anything. It shouldn't be really very restrictive at all. It should give you more freedoms, if anything. You know.
Right. I agree with that. Um, I hear all the time, and I see in debates and whatnot that people they talk about uh, more restrictions and things like that infringing upon their civil liberties.
Mm-hmm.
And to a certain extent, like I agree, like with let's take gun ownership, for example. A lot of people are against gun control because they think it's going to infringe upon their right to bear arms.
Right.
And I think if done correctly, it shouldn't infringe upon that. You should be able to have more security and still have the freedom to own your gun legally the way you want to be able to own it.
Right. Like
So
out here in Vegas, they just passed a law not too long ago stating that you could no longer buy or sell firearms on the street anymore without having background checks and things like that done. You used to be able to just meet up any location, write out a little handbill between you two and an agreed upon currency amount, and boom, there was a sale right there of a gun. And you don't know who you're buying from, or nobody knows who you are. So, and I've been a part of some of those transactions. I've actually bought some off the street when it was legal. But recently, they just passed a law saying that if you're going to private sale any firearms, you have to go to any business with an FFL license and pay for a background check, and getting that background check and receipt put in the purchaser's name. So, and there might be people that have a problem with it, but at the same time, I really don't.
So that's crazy. I had no idea that they previously had that law out there where you could make a purchase of a firearm like that.
Yep, it's not something some people just normally knew about off top, because nobody really thought of just selling a firearm on the street like that. But it was legal to do it. I've done it, and overall, it's just an unnerving process, because while it was legal to sell it on the street without having to get a background check months ago, you were still essentially liable for who you sold it to. So the extra security of having to go into a business with an FFL license to get background checks done kind of really helps in keeping you protected and keeping your freedoms available to you, because if you got caught and jailed or anything like that because you sold to a felon or anything, then there goes essentially all of your freedom for a certain period of time.
Right. So yeah, I think that's a perfect example of an extra security measure that provides more freedom. And yeah, you put it so eloquently, man. So in today's day and age, it's a digital world with cell phones and computers. Technology is it's getting more and more sophisticated.
Right.
Do you ever worry about the government surveilling you through those devices? Is that something that you think about?
I think that it's already happening, honestly, because there'll be times where my wife and I will be just talking, just regular talking about a subject, and we didn't look it up on our phones. We didn't do anything over the internet about the subject. We'll just be talking about it. When we don't have Alexa or any of those echoes or things that you talk to, because we just don't roll like that.
Right.
And next thing you know, our conversation will be over. We'll get back into our own phones or start doing our own thing. The next thing you know, all of the ads on Facebook have now turned into exactly what we were just talking about. And it's like are you serious? Like, you know, and it's happened multiple times. So they're already listening in, and a lot of the times it's, they're just not going to do anything unless it's a serious matter.
Right. Right. Yeah, man.
But
I've had that
it
happen
is
to
an
me.
invasion of privacy. Yeah.
Yeah. I've had that happen to me so many times, or I'm having a conversation, or like even if I'm just like, and it's weird, but even if I'm just thinking about something, and like I don't do anything on the internet about it, and I'll go on Facebook, and there it is, all the ads. So it's definitely an invasion of privacy. And like you said, most of the time they don't do anything with it, unless you yourself do something to get on their radar.
Right.
And
But
I think one of the arguments for that, and because they've stopped so many potential terrorist attacks because of
yeah.
so I understand why they do it, but at the same time it freaks me out.
Oh no, and I totally get it too, because when I used to work at the hospital, I used to work in the DOU, Direct Observation Unit, which was where anybody on a legal hold or a 72-hour hold was placed and locked down in. And most of the people that are put on a 72-hour hold are people who are not in the right state of mind, or on a psychotic um, altering drug. They're off of their medications. They're bipolar, schizophrenic, stuff like that. And one time we had somebody that that they felt like they were wronged because they were put on a legal hold to get mentally evaluated because they had posted something on Facebook stating that they were going to blow up or shoot up, a school or something like that. They had posted about committing an act of terrorism. And next thing you know, the cops show up, take this person and put him on a legal hold and everything like that. And it was a social media outlet that put him there. Well, at the same time, it was their own words and actions that put him there. But you know, it's, in my opinion, stuff like that, when it comes to extreme measures like that, you know it's okay for them to act on it.
Right.
Whereas, the government, things like that, I'm sure they're listening in on on phones and spying and everything like that. It's really not hard to believe. um but it does help stop a lot of things, and terrorist attacks. It helps find people. So I think it's fine as long as they only act upon it when necessary. If it's not necessary, or it's just not a serious thing or anything like that, then you didn't have a they didn't have a warrant to listen in onto your phone. They didn't have a warrant to you know use your phone as a tool to get information on a case or anything like that. You see what I'm saying? Like
Yeah, absolutely, man.
when it comes to bodily harm and fear for your life or others' lives, that's when a lot of the laws kind of it can kind of be bent in certain ways. But if nobody's life is in danger or anything like that, it's got to be a strict we cannot interfere even though we just heard this type deal.
Right.
And that would be an example to me. That would be an example of you know of extra security and still keeping your freedom.
I agree with that, man. Um, yeah, I agree with that 100%. If they can prevent an act of terrorism, uh, an attack, or anything that's going to cause people harm or do ill to people, I absolutely believe that they should be able to interfere and act upon that. When they cross that line and do something uh, that doesn't even qualify under that, then we got issues. But so far, that hasn't been the case.
Right.
So yeah, that's another perfect example of when extra security provides you more freedom. Um, I think a lot of the times when people have this discussion, like you said, they view it very black and white. Like you can only have one or the other. I think they both work together in sync, and that's how it's supposed to be.
Right.
So another aspect when it comes to security and freedom, you are a parent. I'm a parent as well. Your kids are not in school yet, but mine are.
Right.
So one of my biggest concerns as a parent when I send them out is what security measures are being taken to keep them safe. And when I was younger, I felt completely different about this because I didn't have kids and I didn't see it from this perspective. But when I was younger, I thought that if they're adding all these rules and measurements and things like that, then it takes away from the child's experience. Um, but having grown up and had children of my own, like I want them to add every security measure you possibly can to keep my kids safe. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I've always I've always had the mentality of, have just enough rules and security to keep the child safe, but not so much that it puts them in a bubble. Like
Right, right,
I want my kids to, fall down, learn from their mistakes, things like that. But I don't want it to be anything that's going to, you know, make me worry if they're going to come home.
right.
It and I don't think any parent should have to worry if their child is going to come home that day or not. I think it should be a given. There used to be a point in time where it was a given that your child was going to go home because, even among criminals and thieves and everything like that, gangbangers, anything, there was a rule. There used to be a rule of you do not go after
Children.
children and certain family members, things like that.
Right.
But now that's not the case. They don't care. You got people on the streets, just blatantly firing at cops. 20 years ago, that wasn't a thing. They didn't just fire at cops, for no reason. Yeah, but nowadays it's anybody is game, and it's sad.
Yeah, man. it's a weird time that we live in, because like I can remember to when uh, those rules, those unspoken rules applied, that certain people were off limits, and there has been a shift, and people are just, they're so brazen about it now, and they don't care,
Hmm.
like you said. Um, so it's a constant fear of mine that when I send my kids to school, something's gonna happen, and I wish I could say that nothing like that ever happens, but you've seen all these school shootings. Like,
Right.
it's a reality now. Um, so I'm with you, man. I want the security measures there, but I don't want my child to live in a bubble as well. So it's hard trying to find that balance, especially when I have to talk to my kids about the things that are going on. Like,
Right.
I don't want to scare them, but at the same time I don't want them to be oblivious to what's happening outside,
Right.
because if they do encounter something like that, I want them to be as prepared as possible.
Right. And I think that is just like the hardest part of finding that finding that line of how to describe the things that are going on, because you know it's not just one way or the other anymore. You you have racially mixed children, and so do I.
Right.
So on you know they've got to we've got to teach them both backgrounds to it, and let them know and try and help them understand, all points of view, and then teach them right from wrong and how to handle it properly, or as proper as they can. And sometimes that just gets, some of those lines can get real blurred real fast.
Oh
And
yeah.
if it's blurred for us adults, which most of them are, like um, our relationships with our wives, there's a lot out there that see it as negative because you are a black man with a white woman and I'm a white man with a black woman.
Right.
And so that's what I'm talking about, of blurred lines, because adults are sitting there saying, like, you know, they'll look at my wife side-eyed and be like, why are you with a white man? There are people that'll look around and I'm sure they're thinking, why are you with a black woman? And vice versa for you and your wife. And it's like, it,
Yeah.
it's
Absolutely.
weird, and it sucks that you have to try and explain this aspect to a child of both worlds. And it can really start to mess with them. Like, you say it wrong in any way or describe it in any way, make them scared, or just kind of play too much toward one side. Well, now they have a skewed view on half of their culture.
Yeah, man. I unfortunately I've already had to experience that with Malachi. He so he had an incident at school where um, one of the kids called him the N word,
Oh no.
and he had no idea what it was, what it meant. But he knew it was bad
Right.
just by the way the kid said it. So when he told me about it, I had to talk to him about what that word means and why he was called that. And then after that, like for a long time, like both him and Maurice would come home and they would tell me how much like they did not want to be black.
And see, that's
And like it hurts me because I want them to be able to embrace every aspect of their heritage.
right.
But when there are people in the world who view being black as a negative, and then they project that onto their children, and their children go into the world and speak that into existence and things like that, and take it back to other kids, it's so hard, especially as a parent, to hear that and to have to try and explain to him that, like, I I understand how you're feeling, but, like, son, you are both black and white. Like, there's no getting around it.
Right.
So I've been working with Malachi to try to get him to accept both sides of him.
Well, and you know what? There's so many wonderful people and movements that have come from the black community that
Right.
nobody should be ashamed to be black. You know, I mean, some of the movies that I can think of, well, one of them that, because Jana, my wife, just um, saw another clip of today and she wants to rewatch it, is Hidden Figures. Have you seen that?
I have. That's a wonderful film.
It is. You know, and the scene that she saw that I was overhearing again was the one where, you know, the white boss was sitting there, you know, asking where she had been, and she was, you know, frustratingly describing how she has to walk to Timbuktu to go and, you know, use the restroom because they at NASA did not have a colored bathroom.
Right.
And, you know, sitting there getting upset that these other white people would not drink from the same coffee pot as this woman, you know, and but next thing you know, all these women, when that new computer, when that first computer got to NASA, they had the foresight to tell all the other women to learn the handbook for the computer, how to fix it, how to work it, how to use it, everything like that,
Right.
to a point where they became indispensable to NASA. This group of black women became virtually unfireable because nobody else knew how to use it as well as they did. And then you had the black woman who did all of the mathematics
Mm-hmm.
and the calculating for NASA to get to get rockets the rocket up to the moon and everything like that, get it into outer space. That's what, you know, you're furthering the scientific studies, you're furthering your community by getting women education, and you were furthering the cause for you know, the black people and civil rights and everything like that, all, you know, all in that one story.
Right. Right. Yeah, man. It's a fantastic film. The history behind it, like, I love it. Um, and yeah, you know, that's a perfect example of why you should celebrate all sides of your heritage. And I actually, Malachi watched that movie with me, and he was amazed by it. Um,
Yep.
so yeah, man, I definitely think, uh, like you said, the lines can get blurred a lot when it comes to children.
Yep.
But I am a firm believer that more security does not have to mean less freedoms.
Right.
And I wish, my hope is that I can, especially with this episode, that I can promote that to more people, to come around to that way of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you have both of those, security and freedom, working harmoniously together, I mean, it creates a society that can truly thrive.
Right.
So, I mean, that's where I stand on security and freedom. I think they both go hand in hand.
No, absolutely.
So yeah, I really do appreciate you coming on and speaking your mind about it, man. Like I asked you to come on because like I love the way you think. Like
I
there are
I
a lot
can
of
play
people,
both
yeah,
sides of the field.
there are a lot of people in my life who are they claim they're open minded, but they're really set in their ways. Um, so
Right.
I appreciate when people can come on and speak openly and hear different points of views and things like that.
Mm.
And that's pretty much the whole point of this podcast is to get people to start talking more about the difficult topics without getting offended so much.
Oh, absolutely.
Like we have to be able to sit down and be able to talk to each other without
Well,
getting upset and things like that.
well, and just touch on that subject real quick. I mean, one, there's no need to be offended. The other thing too is if you get offended, okay, it's not illegal for you to be offended.
Right.
You know, somebody has an opinion and it doesn't line up with yours. Okay, that's their opinion and that's your opinion. You cannot force anybody to take their opinion back because you have all of a sudden become offended. Go ahead, be offended. It doesn't mean that you are allowed to just blatantly disregard somebody else's opinion. Now,
Absolutely, man.
and that's where I think a lot of the issues have come into play today. Because like there's this could get some people socially crucified, but scientifically transgender people, they start off as one gender, and even when they transition they might be physically the other gender, but biologically they are still what they were born as.
Right.
And there are some people that are going to be set in their way of whatever you were born as is what you are, period. And you know it does it suck that they aren't open-minded enough to just give them the proper title that they want to be called by? Yeah, it sucks. At the same time, you know while you might be offended, you can't just take to the streets and physically impede them from going on to their daily life, and and causing problems like this because they have a different mindset than you.
Right. Right. Uh, hang on 1 minute.
Yep.
Yeah, man. So I agree with you with that sentiment, and I think if it's okay to be offended, instead of disregarding someone else's opinions or feelings, when you get offended, it's okay to let someone know, hey, I'm offended. Can you please explain to me why you feel that way? And we can talk about it.
Okay.
That's how it should work.
Well, the other thing too is that you can avoid being offended a lot more often if in your mind, if they say something that might rub you the wrong way, before just going off or even asking them to explain, you can sit there and think in your head all the different ways or reasons someone might say something like that.
Right.
And when you do that, it's already creating more open-mindedness, and it's already saying like, hey, they've said this for a reason. Now, did they say this for a reason that it could be construed as very rude, mean, and, just overall bad? Or do they have some, reasoning to it? Most of the time, there's a lot of people that just have a reason behind why they're saying it. Something had happened to them, or a loved one, anything like that. I find it's a lot more rare that you actually meet somebody who truly means something wholeheartedly in a rude, disrespectful way just because that's how they want to be.
Right. I agree with that, man. I think we all as a society need to learn how to be more understanding,
Mm-hmm.
because understanding leads to comprehension and acceptance. And you may never agree on a certain subject, but to be able to understand where each other are coming from uh, moves everything forward. It
Mm-hmm.
allows us as a society to come together, because there are a lot of things that I don't agree with a lot of people on, but I understand where they're coming from, and I can still have that mutual respect, and we can still, speak to each other and coexist peacefully.
Right.
So, I mean, I like I said, I appreciate you coming on, man. I love the way you think, and I would hope you would come back on again for another episode. I would love to have that happen.
I'd be happy to. Just let me
Absolutely.
know.
Absolutely. I was in the future, I would like to do like an episode with the misses as well. Have both our
Okay.
wives on. I think that would be interesting.
That would be interesting.
All
And
right, man.
scary.
Yeah. All right, man. Like I said, thank you so much. Oh, before I end this, do you want to plug your channel or?
Sure. So for those of you listening, if you like to watch scary gaming or anything like that, right now I've got a channel on YouTube, and the game I'm playing right now is Outlast. I'm not very big on scary things or gaming, but I figured I'd give it a shot. I've got five little episodes up on Outlast of me playing, also my reactions of freaking out on playing. And there's going to be a lot of different other videos down the road of like product testing, things like that. But yeah, please check it out. It's I go by Phat Stone, and it's spelled PHAT space D period space Stone. So it's spelled out Phat D Stone, but I just go by Phat Stone. Check it out. If you enjoy it, like and subscribe, and I'd really appreciate it.
Awesome, man. I love your videos. They make me crack up, dude. Like your reactions are hilarious.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm trying to get a little more natural on the camera. It's slowly getting there. I was real awkward that first episode, but bit by bit it gets a little easier.
Hey, that's how it was with me when I started this podcast. I mean, the more and more you do it, the better you're gonna be at it. So
That's true.
all right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. That was my friend, my cousin, Dallon Stone, aka Phat Stone. Go check his channel out on YouTube. I appreciate everyone listening. Dallon, thank you once again, man, for joining me.
And thank you. Thanks for having me. I'll see you next time, man.
Absolutely, man.
All right. Love you, brother.
Love you too, man. Take care.
Yep. Bye.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Third Eye Podcast. I'd like to thank my guest, Dallon Stone, aka Phat D Stone, for joining me on this topic of security versus freedom. I think it's a very prevalent conversation in the world today because there are so many people who fear the government's involvement, and they genuinely think that more security measures takes away their freedom. I, however, think that both things can work together harmoniously to create a better path for us. But reach out to me. Let me know how you feel. Do you like more security measures? Do you think it infringes upon your civil liberties? Let me know on Twitter at Third Eye Podcast. Let me know on Facebook. Or you can reach me via email at marcuscallahan.89@gmail.com. I'd be more than happy to speak with anyone about this. Please go ahead and check out Dallon's YouTube channel. Subscribe, listen, help him out. He's a wonderful dude, just trying to build up his audience. Please subscribe to my podcast on whatever listening device you're listening on. And let's finish this quarantine out right, guys. Stay in the house, wash your hands, be kind to one another, love each other, and let's have a wonderful night.